Well, good
Good
morning,
morning.
lady in pink.
Good morning,
What are you all
everybody.
dressed up for?
Well, because it was a very exciting night last night, the primary, so I need to dress up according to the show. We have a special guest and special program, and of course, I was gonna be next to you, so this is just enough important.
That makes your day, right? Sitting
Of
next
course,
to
that makes
me.
your day.
Oh, makes your day.
Makes your day my compliment.
Yeah.
Welcome to TLC Live as every Wednesday. Well, today's March 2nd, and yesterday, Tuesday, we had the primaries. Very exciting night. I was with our dear friend, Vidal Martinez. He is running,
A TLC endorsed candidate for Harris County judge.
correct.
Yeah.
So I was there. We miss you, Orlando, a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, I volunteer because, as you know, the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is also going on, and that is the world's largest rodeo, but it's organized by 35,000 volunteers. And so
But I was representing you.
if we
That's
don't
fine.
work, the rodeo doesn't go on. So, but I did keep an eye out. You know what's sad, I will say, is that, could our friends on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, screw up Harris County more than they have? I mean, not only is the criminal justice system a disaster and crimes out of control, but they've only counted 213 precincts as of this morning.
I know.
I,
We were
I,
like,
I just I don't get it. It's all computerized.
I
I mean,
know.
in the old days we'd get mad if we didn't have election results. Beverly Kaufman used to be the county clerk, and if she didn't have the results by 10:30, everybody was up in arms. Here we are the day after, almost lunchtime, and only 200 plus precincts have been counted in Harris County. I don't get it. But anyway, I guess you get what you choose.
Exactly. So that's why we try to change.
Yeah.
Well, Vidal Martinez, welcome to TLC. And so far as the early voting and preliminary counting, you're going to the runoff.
That's correct. It appears that 206 precincts have been counted, and me and one other person got over 50% of the vote. So we expect that to hold as the rest of the count comes in.
Yeah, that's probably
But
going to
it's
be the
it's
trend.
as you said, it's a disaster. The election results should have been by 10 o'clock news last night, and it just didn't happen.
No, I feel sometimes like I'm living in a, Caribbean banana republic. We might get the election results next week. I mean, it's just unacceptable. But nonetheless, I think you're right. I think the numbers will hold. So I want to congratulate you because obviously you are our endorsed candidate. And so the runoff is going to be when, Vidal? When are they scheduling that?
The runoff is almost 3 months away on May 24th. I think there's going to be some legislation in the next legislative session to shorten the time period for a runoff. But we're following the federal calendar, and so May 24th is a runoff. So just short of 1 week, 3 months away.
So, were you surprised at the election results? Because, there uh, was it Dixon, Lamont Dixon didn't do quite as well as
Martina?
Martina
Uh-huh.
Lamont Dixon. How do you see that race, Vidal? And what do you think were the advantages that you and Miss Mealer had?
Well, I think my advantages are primarily being here for 47 years in Houston and in the criminal justice system. I'm former federal prosecutor, former state bar chairman of all lawyers in Texas. On the public health side, I've been on the number one hospital in Texas, Methodist. I've been on the board for 30 years now. And on the transportation side, which is the third bucket of infrastructure that counties are in charge of, I was a former port commissioner and also chairman of the transportation committee of the Greater Houston Partnership. So that experience has led to, I've been first seat in all three areas that the county runs.
Yeah, and I think that's critical. I mean, educational qualifications are good, but I think a lot of times, the practical experience is paramount, especially when you're asked to jump into a position running, helping chair the legislative side of the third largest county in America. It's important to have, as Vidal says, I mean, healthcare is important because we do have one of the largest charity hospitals in the United States, both LBJ, Ben Taub, through Harris Health. And then, infrastructure is huge, given our tollway system and all the roads and bridges that we have to maintain. And so those are two critical components. And I think, as you mentioned, you have years of experience in those areas.
But the most important thing, Vidal, is like, you decide to run for this position and you've been working so hard from the moment that you announced. And now you're going to the runoff, and it's going to be, a lot of work this following 3 months before the runoff on May 24th. But tell us why it's important for people keep to participating. I was yesterday talking, my dad went to vote, and a couple of my friends went to vote, and I was very excited, and we had a beautiful day. That was another good ingredient on elections day, that a lot of people were going and vote, even though that normally, in the primaries, we don't have a lot of people motivated and excited to go to vote, but we saw a lot of polls. I mean, it was lines of people voting. But still, we didn't have the whole result. We still, till now, do not have the completely total of the result. But why we need a change, and why you decide to run for office, and why we need to do this following 3 months to support you for the runoff?
Well, you can look at what's going to happen on January 3rd, the very first day. My agenda has now shifted to from number two, firing the elections administrator, to number one now.
Right.
But number two is to change the bail bond reform that we have right now. We settled a case that didn't need settling, and we spent $100 million, and I'm going to cancel that. And the third item is get our $8 billion back from the state for the I-45 expansion. These are things that are going to happen on day one. And we're going to eliminate the elections administrator and return it back to Stan Stannard, the county clerk, where the Texas Constitution puts all the responsibility for running elections. Only about 15 counties have elections administrators. We're the largest, and the other ones are because there's so little population, they needed to accumulate those services there in the rural areas. So those are some of the indicators. And in the crime wave, we have to address it right now, and that means putting the district attorney on a performance plan. She wants 60 more lawyers. We'll give her 15, and 100 days later, we'll measure the backlog reduction of the 108,000 criminal cases that are in the backline. So those are some of the most immediate things. Is let's take care of infrastructure. Let's not stray into social programs. We don't do early childhood education. We don't provide lawyers for immigration purposes. We don't spend $17 million on a tent hospital at NRG without ever seeing a single patient. So let's get back to the three things that counties are supposed to do, and that's what I'm going to emphasize in the runoff here. And we'll probably have somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 Republican voters, but as Orlando knows, only about 25% to 30% vote in a runoff. So it's going to be getting the message out, getting people to vote, and getting them to return to the polls so that we can move on to the general election race against Lena Hidalgo.
This is your first foray into public office. What was your biggest surprise in your first campaign?
I guess my biggest surprise was the number of people that came out that I had met in these last 47 years around Houston. People that I met 20 and 30 years ago, old clients, people that were showing up to support me for this race, and also the basic thinking that this county judge and this gang of three have just totally crashed our county finances and our county programs into a wall, and that it needed to be fixed. It's worse when you really dive down into the numbers and you look at some of the corruption issues. It's worse than I thought.
I want to comment. I find this surprising because obviously, I spent 12 years as county treasurer. and when the conservatives were at the helm at the county. And were things perfect? No, but they were far better than they are now from a fiscal perspective. We were in the black. We didn't have any more tax anticipation notes. Our crime levels were, comparable to other cities. It was considered a safe county, a safe city, and then we were swept out. But what I find interesting, and then we'll ask Professor Wolfe later, is that in 2018, the candidates that the Democrats put up hardly campaigned. Lena Hidalgo had no experience, no campaign funds.
27 years old.
Didn't raise any money. 27 years old, had hardly entered. Had just entered the job market. Probably clueless about the operations of Harris County. And the fellow that beat me had raised no money, did no campaigning, and we were swept out of office. And what's interesting is that gentleman that beat me got swept out last night. I mean, these are folks that do no campaigning. They have no command of the issues. And it's just bizarre to me how that works. But I guess it's just a comment
Well,
on
we
on,
won't
on the
have we won't
Democrats.
have the same dynamics that were there in 2018. You had the midterm for President Trump. You had a last time you could straight ticket vote. You had an unknown candidate like Beto O'Rourke out there that got everyone excited. Now everyone knows who he is. He's against guns. He's against the oil and gas industry. I guess if he was against Friday Night Football, everyone would dislike him. But I think it's the same dynamics, and we're going to have the wind at our back because the Biden White House is in total disarray. And you see what our reputation is around the world, and inflation and gas prices. So they're not going to be able to fix this year. And I think there's a reckoning that's coming on November 8th.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I hope you enjoyed your first foray. Now you're getting into round two, so we want to wish you the very best. Let us know what we can do to continue to highlight your issues. And as Andrea likes to say, what is your call to
What is your
action for
call to
everybody
action?
watching?
What we
What
can
is
do
it?
to help you?
What is it you want the folks watching you to do for you?
Pay attention, come vote on May 24th, and talk to everyone you know at this point. It's going to take a full team effort to win this, but we're also campaigning against Lena right now. So we got to win the runoff, and we got to get ready for her because she's got a 3-month head start on us right now.
Okay, and visit your website for sure. We have it. We're gonna put it on the screen. Visit your website, and people can not only learn about you, learn about the issues, but also make a contribution to your campaign.
Thank you so much. And Orlando, I remember your first race. I was there. That's 30 years ago.
That was a long time ago. Well, thanks, Vidal. Good luck, and we'll see you on the campaign trail.
Thank you both, and thank you
Gracias,
for
Vidal.
the endorsement from Texas Latinos Conservatives. It meant a lot.
You bet. Happy to do it. All right.
Well, and thank you, Vidal, and to analyze what happened last night in the primaries and what is going on in our political field in Texas, in Harris County. So we have Dr. Chris Wolfe. He is the Doctor of Philosophy and Political Science in the St. Thomas University. Well, Dr. Wolfe, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for being with us. And of course, I want to thank you also, my dear friend Claudia Deschamps, for putting everything together.
And hola to Claudia. Professor Wolfe, welcome to the program. First question for you is, there's a lot that's made about primary turnouts. Clearly, I think at least in Harris County, more Republicans turned out. How does that compare to 2018 and also statewide? Were there more Republicans? And is that an indication of enthusiasm?
Yes. To the last question, that is a measure of enthusiasm. And to the first question, the Republican turnout was higher than the Democrats this time. And looking back to 2018, it was also higher. I'm looking at something right now. It says that it was 10.2% for Republicans versus 7% in 2018, versus it's kind of too early to know, but looking like about another 3 percentage point difference this time around. So kind of similar, but I agree with Vidal, what he was saying uh, about that being kind of a bit of a different election. I remember I had just moved here to Houston, and it was like I was walking through fields of Beto signs everywhere. And, and there was, I think there was enthusiasm for the Democrats that time in that race against Cruz, but statewide, Cruz still won, pretty handily. But in Houston, a lot of judges who were Republicans lost their seats, and you lost your seat as treasurer, and Lena Hidalgo was elected to commissioner judge here. So it doesn't seem exactly like that this time, but there's some other things we have to think about again is that it was, Trump was president back then versus Biden being president this time. Typically, it's when the president, his party is coming up on the midterm, they typically don't do well. And so, in 2018, that was not a surprise that, there were some seats lost for the Republicans. It shouldn't be a surprise if the Democrats lose seats this time, especially given the polling numbers for Biden, definitely in the tank recently. Ever since he's been underwater ever since the fall of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I understood yesterday was a report. I don't know who wrote the story, but he has the second lowest rating of any president going into the State of the Union. And, you know, that's pretty low. I mean, I can't remember. Was it in our lifetime? Who was it that had a lower rating than President Biden? Was it Jimmy Carter?
It certainly feels like Carter,
Yeah.
given
Yeah.
a lot of the different issues that have gone on. I mean, and George W. Bush had kind of a low approval rating during some of the Iraq years after 2006. But yeah, I mean, so many of the different issues do seem like Carter. I watched the State of the Union last night, and what was funny was on a bunch of different issues, President Biden seemed to be voicing support for positions that Trump took. I mean, he was saying things like secure the border, uh, fund the police, defund big tech, things that Biden has not supported at all in the past, but he seemed to be introducing that at the State of the Union, perhaps in an attempt to right the ship for the Democrats. But I mean, they don't really support any of those issues, the Democrats. So I didn't know what he was doing exactly. I mean, supporting Ukraine, obviously that's a winning issue, but the other things weren't really typical Democratic positions.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that on the international front with Ukraine and Putin making that move. But one of the questions I have is, and it may be too early because, as you know, we know Harris County results aren't in. But do you just the preliminary and cursory review of the numbers? Do you believe that more Latinos down in South Texas participated in the Republican primary? I know, for example, if you look at Maverick County, they had 8 Latino Republicans file. That's never happened in Maverick County, which, as you know, is a border county. And the seat is Eagle Pass, Texas. And there was a dust up because when Hispanic Republicans went to vote, they were directing them over to the Democratic primary voting booths operated by the Democratic Party. The Republican Party filed a complaint, and of course that was remedied. But looking at the numbers preliminarily in Valverde County and Uvalde County, Maverick County, Starr County, Hidalgo, Cameron County, do you think more Hispanics participated in the Republican primary?
Yes. I mean,
Mm.
and we knew that just from the early voting results that the turnout for Republicans in the Valley was beyond anything in midterm that we had seen before. I mean, and it was, so that's a big change, and that's why it's great to be on here, the Texas Latino Conservative show with y'all, because this is a big change and a big boom for Republicans, and I'm really interested in that House 28 election, for the U.S. House, between what was a Democratic seat, Cisneros,
Versus Monica de la Cruz.
yeah, that was the Democrat. I think it's Garcia and Witten are in a runoff
Okay.
on the Republican side down there.
Yeah.
Doctor, another thing that you were mentioning, that the numbers of people voting Republican is getting higher. So in the personal experience, yesterday, a couple of my friends went to vote. They're all Latinos. My dad is Latino. I'm from Colombia. They went to vote, and the feedback that they were giving me, they were texting me and said, like, it's been an hour and I'm still in the line, because they were voting Republican, and said, like, the line for the Republican Party is so long, and I don't see nobody in the Democratic line, and they said, like, it's been an hour and I'm still here. And normally they're been voting every election, and they said, like, I didn't feel that it happened before. It was a surprise, especially in the primaries, seeing this line of people voting and in the Republican Party, and I was like, taking an hour to vote. For them, it was a surprise, and for me too.
Mm-hmm. I voted yesterday and voted in the Republican primary, and the line I was in was much shorter, because this was in a pretty liberal part of town, Montrose. And I was actually happy about that, because I can give some more anecdotal evidence of how much these machines are messing up in Harris County. There was a lady in line, there was almost nobody in the Republican line there, which was good, because the machines were messing up right in front of me. I saw a lady who, I mean, the way they work is, like, you put in one form and it prints off, and then you put in another form and it prints off again. And if you crinkle up the paper at all in these kinds of machines, it seems like they're not accepting the ballots. So I'm really glad in some ways that they're getting all this out of the way right now, rather than during the general election, and hopefully they make some changes. Otherwise, it's going to be a fiasco at the general election.
Yeah, well, I'm not optimistic, given the track record at the county, that they're going to fix anything. But here's what's interesting to me, and I don't think anyone's brought it up. I want your opinion as a political scientist. Our votes are supposed to be secret, and so these new machines print out, very legibly, your vote, and then you got to walk around the entire voting center, because where my machine was at the multi-service center off of West Gray, the station where you then slide your ballot again, you got to walk around the whole building so everybody can see how you voted, and then if it messes up, the election clerk gets to come grab your ballot, and of course they're looking to see who you voted for. So there's really nothing secret about it. I know I was voting, and they gave me 2 sheets of paper. So the election clerk comes to me as the machine is printing my choices, which are supposed to be secret, and she's looking at it, and I says, well, so much for the secrecy of the vote in Harris County. But and I'm surprised someone hasn't mentioned that, because all these election clerks and the public that you're walking around with your ballots get to see what you've done.
Mm-hmm. I've been asked if there are going to be lawsuits, and I said, I don't think this time, but if it's like this next time, yeah, there's going to be some lawsuits. I mean, about that very thing. I think about what was just mentioned about people being sent to different lines, and in the primary, makes sense to me that would be a legal problem. And I had a student yesterday say, well, you can't bring in a phone to the ballot. And I said, wow, I saw people doing that. It was kind of anything goes, and people were handing out, you have all kinds of ballot cards, and the West Gray station was pretty crazy. Just the parking lot was crazy. I mean, the signs everywhere, and um,
What's
it
great is
was
always crazy when it comes to vote. It's
yeah,
like that place is always packed.
yep,
I
yeah,
want to go back to the issue that we were discussing about the number of Republicans that have turned out, but from our perspective, because we're encouraging conservative Latinos in Texas to vote their values. That is, we're a state hybrid general purpose PAC. We're a 501c4 where we train young people on how to become active in the political process. So that's where we're focused on, and we've got a tall order ahead of us because I know people get excited about what happened down in South Texas. But I want to remind our viewers and the Republican leadership that the growth in Texas is not in the Rio Grande Valley or in South Texas. The growth in Texas is in urban areas. And the Republicans have lost every major urban county in the state. And that's an observation and a comment. Given that, uh, many political scientists talk about major realignments in American politics. And many political scientists believe that there is a major realignment in the United States with respect to what they generally called the sleeping giant. That is the Hispanic population in this country. And, you're seeing bits of it in Texas. I don't study Arizona. I don't study California. I don't study Colorado. But do you believe that there is a major political realignment, the first wave of which we saw was 2020, and a bigger wave to come? That's phase one of my question to you. Phase two of my question and comment is that Republicans have an opportunity in this state to seize that moment, but they also have an opportunity to blow it. And do you tend to agree with those two, uh, you know, comments or questions?
I do. Um, and I would say that there's not only a realignment in the Latino community, but I think there's a realignment that has gone on within the Republican Party itself that has facilitated that happening. Um, during the Trump years, it there was, the kind of um, rhetoric that conservatives sometimes would have that would, uh, you know, be focused less on small businesses but more helping big business and globalization. That's that changed somewhat under Trump, and there's been more of an emphasis on uh, the lower middle class and the middle class, and that's been good uh, for trying to reach out to broader parts of the American voting populace. Just to give you some kind of something from political science that uh, was interesting to me that I saw when I was in graduate school. I was at graduate school in Claremont, California, and at Claremont we did the redistricting for the state of California at this institute at the Claremont McKenna College called the Rose Institute. And a friend showed me a map one time of Latino voters and with a lot of different breakdowns. And at least at the time, he was pointing out that at the border states at that time, yes, Latinos were mainly voting Democrat. But in the states outside the border states, Latinos were voting more or less along the same lines as their economic strata. I mean, you know, um, and so that was very interesting to me that there seems to be some issues that were, perhaps involving immigration at that time, which was, about 10 years ago, that the border states were more Democrat for Latino voters. But with that changing, uh, um, so the Valley data is very interesting to me, um, in terms of what's going on with Latino voters and what's going on in the Republican Party.
One of the comments that I make is that, I've spent a lot of time along the Texas border. In 1976, I was stationed at Laughlin Air Force Base in Valverde County, which is Del Rio, Texas. So I've been very close to the Latino community, and we all knew that the big elections were the Democratic primary, because in November there weren't any Republicans that ran, and the turnout was low, and unless it was a presidential year. So by default, whoever the Democrat nominee was in South Texas was the winner. Whether it be county sheriff or nominee for U.S. Congress or whatever. But what was interesting is that yesterday, for example, the New York Times and CNN Politics covered South Texas, particularly the Rio Grande Valley, and they focused on Mayra Flores's race. And Mayra was the Republican seeking the nomination for the 34th Congressional District out of Harlingen. She's very special to us because, as you know, through our nonprofit, Texas Latino Conservatives has a nonprofit, we have an organization called Leadership Latino. And we travel around the state of Texas encouraging young folks and training them how to become involved in politics. Maida was one of our students.
One of our first ones.
Yeah, early students in December of 2018. Very shy, young lady, didn't do politics at all. And it's gratifying to see that not only did she step up to run for Congress, it's a challenging seat. First of all, it leans Democrat after redistricting. But the fact that she's willing to do it, and the fact that she is garnering national attention. New York Times did another story on her yesterday. CNN Politics, I've posted that on my personal Facebook page, talks about the potential for the future and the realignment. But I did pose another question, which I hope is going to be the last question, because I think we have our next guest, who's your colleague as well.
Yeah, gotta give him some time.
This is an opportunity for the Republican Party of Texas. They can either seize it and build upon it, but I have seen them blow it many, many times. And I got to tell you, I'm not real optimistic about what I see in their efforts because, as I stated earlier, the growth in Texas is urban Texas, not rural Texas. And so we're all excited and wrapped around the axle about what's going on in South Texas. But I'm telling you, if the Republicans in this state don't figure out how to apply conservative principles to urban problems, we're done. That's my perspective. I'd like yours.
Yeah, that is an important thing to consider, I think. I mean, last election, what was surprising was how poorly Republicans did in the suburban areas. And I don't know if that's a result of that they just were turned off by Trump in that election or not. Because, I mean, typically the suburban areas were doing really well for Republicans. And so that's another thing I'm really wondering about is, not necessarily some of the city centers, but, some of the suburban areas. Are they going to go back to being Republican if it's not Trump on the ballot, or that's some of that. I do think there's a lot broader realignments going on beyond just the short term effects of who's running for president at that time. But we'll have to wait and see.
I want to just share with you that we are, Texas Latino Conservatives has been engaged in an extensive study of data after the census, and using geocoding and the new census data and voting trends, we were able to drill down into precincts. I can tell you that it shows that the realignment is taking place. It also shows that as Latinos become economically upwardly mobile, they move out of the inner cities into the suburbs and to the exurbs. And it appears, as you stated, that there is an opportunity to win back not only the suburban votes that we had lost in 2020, but also make gains with Hispanics that are, as they move out of the urban area into the suburbs and exurbs, are voting more like their neighbors. That's an opportunity. But this is where I say that the Republicans come in, and they've got to seize the moment, because the problems that are in urban, and when I say urban areas, I'm talking about the metroplex. I'm talking about the Houston metroplex, Harris County area, right? And so crime is an issue. You take the largest school district in our area, Houston Independent School District. That's an abject failure. I mean, people are getting indicted for stealing $8 million. There are schools that are failing. It's just an unmitigated joke, frankly. And so we need the Republicans in this state to focus in on those issues: infrastructure, education, because the only way conservatism, liberty, and freedom are going to survive in this country is that children understand the importance and the difference between, constitutional government, free markets versus socialism and, oligarchs running things. And so that's why I say Republicans need to focus and address the urban issues with conservative solutions. And that'll attract folks. But if they don't, I fear that we're going to miss that potential realignment.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I need to go teach some more students about the Constitution myself, but it's been a wonderful to meet you, Andrea, in Orlando. And thanks so much for having me on today.
All right, pleasure. And
Thank
we
you,
don't want you to
Dr.
be
Wolfe.
we don't want you to be late for your class.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And so we were talking also last night about, what took people to, or what motivate people also to vote. And many people were saying that the Ukrainian and Russia conflicts also make people go and vote and pay more attention of what is going on the news. So of course they find out that it was also election, because many people didn't even know that it was a primaries election. So that also make a big part of people going to vote. So that's why we decide to invite Dr. Richard Sindelar. He's also with St. Thomas University, and he's an assistant professor of courses focusing on American foreign policy, international security, international law, and global trade, to tell us and explain to us not only the conflict, but what is the impact on us, the conflict. Because I was listening to the news this morning, and somebody said that this is not just a conflict between two countries, this is a conflict of all of us. So welcome, Dr. Sindelar. We have him?
I think I'm here. I hope
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see you. It was the microphone covering up. Well, Doctor, welcome to TLC. Thank you so much for your time. This is very important because, now we're since February 24, we've been seeing this conflict that, it was something that we were expecting, probably not at this level, but it's impact the whole world, the economy, everything. So we want you to explain to us what is the impact on us, and what is the conflict right now?
Well, I think we'll start with the question of the impact in the Houston area, which is kind of a double-edged sword. We're in the oil and gas industry, and a barrel of oil has gone way up, which will mean that the oil companies will be making lots of money, and that means they will be hiring people if Russian oil continues to be cut off and prices remain over $100 a barrel. Then you're looking at a situation were the Permian Basin, more activity in the Permian Basin, other shale plays in the United States. So the oil industry actually should do quite well with this. On the other side of this, of course, it's going to impact the world economy as banking systems are shut down, trade systems are impacted. I would expect possibly on the economic side to see greater, uh, uh, yet more supply chain issues. Let me put it that way. Exactly what they would be or where they would come from, hard to say. But as ships are redirected, ships can't go to Russia. You're going to have supply issues, I think, overall. If I might continue on, the biggest issue that I see for the United States and to shine a spotlight on it a little bit is the fact that that where we're probably going to be heavily impacted potentially is cyber warfare. There have been a number of different groups and people looking at how easy it would be to shut down our power grids throughout the United States. We do not have very good cyber shields. Cyber shields for private companies are not revenue generating. So because they don't generate revenue, most companies wanting to look for the profit, the bottom line, the investor's value, they're going to not put a lot of money in it. Well, when this stuff happens, when we know the Russians are probably one of the three best players when it comes to cyber warfare in the world, they could crash our power grid. They could crash the internet. They probably would not do it throughout the country, but we could get another colonial pipeline situation going on. And if that didn't dissuade us, then Putin keeps upping the game. So if the first cyber attack doesn't work, the second one will be bigger. So he's bound and determined to take the Ukraine, and ultimately, I think he probably will get it.
Professor, I want to go take that helicopter ride back up and get out of the forest and just sort of, take the 10,000-foot view. In the past, it was the expansion of communism, right? It was the aggression. We had the Third Reich, we had Germany and the Axis and Japan. And this is, I think, a little different. I mean, I don't think they're spreading communism as much. So what is driving Putin? Is he, first of all, is he want access to the sea? Is he concerned that maybe if they start doing LNG, they won't have access to pipelines to offload their natural gas on ships? Is it just raw aggression, or is he concerned that Ukraine and other non-NATO countries? I mean, because it seems to me he's sort of unifying Europe against, which we've been unable to do. But I think his actions have sort of put Europe back on like, whoa, wait a minute, So what's driving Putin? I mean, some people have said he's mad. He's sort of lost it like, Hitler. I don't think so. I mean, I think Putin's extremely intelligent. I think he's probably the ultimate international chess player. So what do you believe is driving him? Is it acquisition of real estate to ensure pipelines have access to, offload onto ships? Or what is this? Because Ukraine's a pretty massive country.
Correct. There are a couple thoughts here, Orlando, on that. The biggest thing is you're exactly correct. I don't see this, and I don't think many people see this as the old Cold War communism versus democracy thing. I think it is a battle of governing systems, if not an ideology. It really is a actual, real democracy called Ukraine fighting an authoritarian, thuggish state. And to the extent we don't confront Putin, I'll put a footnote here, we're probably going to confront Xi in China because they're basically of the same cloth. These are authoritarian regimes. Communism is just kind of the sheep's clothing, shall we say, they put on the wolf to make it sound politically okay. I think both Putin and his generals they say our generals fight the last war. I think that the Russian generals and Putin are thinking about 2 or 3 wars ago in this way. If you look at the history, I think this is history. It's driven by 2 things. It's driven by the Russian paranoia that George Kennan talked about in the Long Telegram in 1945, where he basically described the Russian body politic as being feeling insecure and virtually paranoid. Okay, he didn't use the word paranoid, but the words that he used was that sort of thing. They have forever feared invasion from the West and have a history to fall back on between Napoleon and Hitler and other threats from Prussians and others over the years. They want what is called, 50, 70 years ago, strategic depth. They want to have enough territory that whether it's theirs personally as a state or is a state that's on their team, one way or another, they want to have strategic depth. They have strategic depth with Belarus, but Ukraine, being a democracy, sticks into the belly of Russia and blocks them from certain access to the Black Sea. They have access to the Black Sea from their own territory, but the better ports are in Ukraine.
Right.
So I think it's an expansion of the sphere of influence more than a territorial expansion. I believe what Putin is looking to do and why Kyiv is the main target. I'll do a footnote here. If you notice, the alleged invasion was to protect Donetsk and Luhansk, the 2 declared republics over there, and there's been almost no significant fighting over there at all. It's very clear he wants the southern loop to close off Ukraine from ports. The other thing is he has to capture Kiev, because in old thugs thinking, you have to have the capital and the radio station and the TV station so that you can declare your puppet government. The previous fellow who was in before, and I'm going to forget his name, was seen in videos yesterday carrying guns and saying he was going off to Ukraine to fight for his side, so to speak. So he'll be put up as a puppet, but then that means the regime is a sphere of influence, falls under the sphere of influence of Putin, and that's what he wants.
Yeah. So, but I want to follow up because this is fascinating to me. I think the GDP of the United States is 10 times that of Russia. From an economic perspective, yes, they have natural resources and they're wealthy. And as you know, oil may go to $200 a barrel. That's great, but if they can't sell it in the market, in other words, if they don't have access to the global markets, I'm sorry, but they're screwed. Ukraine is a lot of real estate. I mean, this isn't like Israel, that's, a few thousand square miles. Ukraine is huge. So from an economic perspective, not only are they getting now squeezed by a unified Western international community from a monetary perspective, but they're not in great financial shape either, right? So the question is, how long and how dark of an economic winter will the Russian people subject themselves to before they realize this is kind of madness? Because I know, footnote here, I think what they're fighting for is the star quarterback. Ukraine is a star quarterback, and it's a question about whether they're going to join the American Football League or the National Football League. I think that's what this whole fight's about. Where are those countries going to align with? And I think you correctly pointed out, it's huge democracy that's, sticking a big stick in the belly of Russia. But how are they going to survive economically if this is protracted? I mean, I just don't think the West is going to sit back. I don't think the Biden administration and the Joint Chiefs of Staff are going to put their boots up on the desk and say, let them have it.
Yes, actually, Orlando, you hit a key point here. Something I teach in my classes. There's something called the security dilemma, that somebody feels insecure. So they feel they have to take action to improve their security. What they end up doing is sowing what they reaped, and it gets much worse.
Yeah.
I think for the next few years, no matter what happens, with Ukraine, the Russians are going to have a hard time politically, a hard time economically. I would hope that we will clamp down on all the oligarchs. I'm a bit upset that we're not doing a much broader brush. There are like 500 oligarchs. They are the ones who empower Putin with their money and their support and their companies, these gigantic companies. If each oligarch on the treasury list of oligarchs to be sanctioned back in the, most of whom were not sanctioned, by the way, back in the Crimean period, there were 100 and some on that list. They each have over $1 billion. If we could scoop up their money in the West, put it in a reserve account to pay to pay for the refugees, to pay for rebuilding Ukraine, that money's out of their hands. And they're going to be upset with Putin. In the long run, Putin himself may have bit off too much that he can chew. The other thing, though, to bear in mind is he has a Chinese back door through which they can sell their oil there, a like-minded regime that they can trade with, a like-minded regime that is awash in foreign currency from their trade surplus. He's got cards on the table. And one last comment, Orlando, the truth of the matter is, if you remember the Cold War, Russia was pretty much cut off. Other than oil and gas, it was pretty much cut off, and it survived for years and years and years. So the question is, can Putin hang on? And as long as he has his generals behind him, I think he can. If he loses the generals, then he's got issues, no matter how harsh it gets for the Russian people.
Yeah, I agree. And you took my next question because you've already commented. I think the wild card is the back door that you mentioned, China. They're probably sitting back analyzing all this, wondering, that's going to be fascinating for me to watch how this is going to develop. This is a lot more dangerous, has the potential of being a lot more dangerous than we think it is. I mean, I hope that, reasonable minds prevail and it really is just becomes a negotiated sort of real estate settlement that, both sides can give and take a little bit. But this has the potential of getting off the rails, right, Professor?
Well, it does. The problem that I see here is what I call the Munich Problem. In 1938, Europeans went ahead and let Hitler have the Sudetenland, and they thought that would appease him. Well, it didn't. It only got worse. The General Gerasimov, if I'm pronouncing his name right, has written a doctrine for the Russian military that basically says we need a sphere of influence that also includes the three Baltic states, Moldova, Poland, basically a rebuild of part of the old Iron Curtain. And he's right now running their military campaign. He's the one advising Putin. So I'm not sure, even if Putin gets all of Ukraine, that we haven't just delayed the inevitable, the bigger battle for the Baltics and other states. So it's getting very dangerous. I would say one thing, people are now talking about trying to figure out a way to give Putin an off-ramp because his military is taking greater casualties. He's beginning to get pushback at home. I'm suspecting that the ramp up in fighting in Kharkiv, Kiev, and Mariupol, the main ports and cities that Putin is after, that he may be willing to take the capital and what's east of the dividing river of the Ukraine, the Dnieper, and put up his puppet Ukrainian state. And that may be enough of an off-ramp that he will let the western part of Ukraine resettle at Lviv, which has been traditionally a major city in the east. And so we'll have two Ukraines, almost an East and West Germany again. That might be his off-ramp if he wants to take it. If he's listening to General Gerasimov, then he may not take that, and we're in for a longer fight.
Dr. Sindelar, I want to put it in a perspective, easy to understand for our families. What we can expect, what consequence, for the family that have to go grocery, for the family that have to drive every day to work, to take the kids to school. The regular life of regular family in this country and in every country in the world.
The main issue now, presuming that we don't go nuclear and we don't get into that game, for the families here, I think what you'll probably see is yet more price rises because of those same supply chain issues. The supply chain issues will get worse until the whole trade scene stabilizes over time. High oil prices, of course, are generally good for Houston, but they mean it costs more to drive trucks. It costs more to run factories. So all the producers of all the goods we buy are going to be paying more for their energy. And so they're going to raise their prices. So I think probably price rises. And I'll kick back just for the 1 second. Whatever you have at home, sign up for every shield you can, because we may get into a cyber war that's major and could take down a lot of our internet infrastructure. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah. I'm going to advise Andrea, she's so young, Professor, to go buy a bunch of stamps at the post office, because we won't be able to send text anymore, emails. So the post office will get the windfall. I want to ask you one last question, which has always fascinated me. Was Nixon correct in engaging and bringing the Chinese into the family of nations, into the economic prospect, thinking that a rising boat a rising tide would lift all boats, and that they would join the community of the family of nations? Has that backfired on us?
Well, at the time when he and Kissinger did that, we do that as a case study in my foreign policy class at the university, that very thing. I think it was a positive move. And remember, the major move was to get the Russians to come to the table to negotiate strategic arms limitation, not whether or not China ever came out into the world. But that was a secondary goal. It worked great for a while. But again, their system tends toward authoritarianism, so it's pretty easy for the authoritarians to seize control, and that's basically what Xi has done. So a good idea, played out well, it went well for 30 years, it's just gone bad because we've changed the leadership in China.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time from a global, international relations. I'm absolutely fascinated about
I can
what's
stay all
going
day
on.
long. I
Yeah,
can
we
stay
could talk
all day
more. I
long.
mean, to me, it's fascinating
It's
because I don't
superb.
know if you know my history. I was born in Havana in 1957, so as a young man, I lived through, the Cuban Missile Crises, and having to flee the island and as a refugee, landing luckily in the United States. But I've watched all that through, communism versus democracies in Latin America. But now it's interesting to see this whole. We thought we had, Europe, and after we lost the Soviet Union, that Russia was going to come around, and now we've got this flare up. So, and even more important is, as you said, it's gonna the back door for Putin is China. It's gonna be fascinating to see how this develops. So, we appreciate your insight. If you would be generous enough to allow us to call you again and follow up in a few weeks, or if there's a flare up, to have you back briefly to tell us what's going on. But we want to thank you for the generosity of your time.
I really want him to come back, Orlando, and I want to develop more, to explain to the regular people in the community what to do, what he was explaining to us, what to do at home to protect ourselves,
Right.
because this conflict is not easy to understand for everybody. And I'm talking about, like, I did news for 15 years, and I always was told, like, talk to people like you're talking to an 8-year-old person, because it's not easy to understand, and it's not easy to understand the consequence. We see it like, oh, it's far away, it's in Europe. No, it's It's our conflict. And what is the consequence and the impact on us in the regular basis, in our journal, in daily basis, with our family, with our kids, driving, going to the grocery, little things that it become at the end big things because it's our daily journal. So that's why we will love to have you back next time to explain more deep on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for having me. I'd be happy to come back. Orlando, I followed you since your early days in politics, so I knew the Cuban connection. So be happy to come back, and thanks for having me today. And
Well,
Chris,
thank you, Professor. God bless, and keep up the good work over at the University of St. Thomas.
Thank
All right.
you so much.
I think we're going to be charged overtime because we're keeping Mark out
Oh
here.
my God,
And
I love the
we're
show.
into Mark's lunch hour, right?
The show, you know what? He was enjoying. I was
This was
seeing
fascinating.
him, and he was like,
This was a fascinating show.
having so much fun.
He was.
Yeah.
Okay, he's about to cut us off, so bid everybody
He
a
didn't want to
farewell.
cut us off.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us. Remember, we're going to be in San Antonio, Texas, April the 5th. Chingo Bling is joining us that
Yay,
lunch. We
can't
are
wait.
honoring our Tough Tejano at the Woody Center, the Mays Museum in San Antonio, April 5th. Go to www.toughtejano.com for all the details. Buy your table or buy your ticket. We will see you in San Antonio April 5th. Remember, April 6th is Tejano Day in Texas, where we honor the contributions of the hard-working, liberty-seeking Tejanos in Texas back in the early 1800s. By the way, Tejanos were the first people to declare Texas as an independent country in 1813.
Y yo soy ahora una colombiana tejana porque I love Tejas.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm gonna. Andrea's going to the rodeo tonight, so I'm gonna see if she's gonna wear pink boots.
Well, not pink, but white. White is in fashion. White boots in fashion right now.
Dear
I always
Lord.
like to wear fashion, even if it's the rodeo. Have you seen the ladies how to go to the rodeo?
Yes, I see the ladies.
Oh my! Well, I know. You pay attention to the ladies. My God, it's like a fashion show. I love it.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Remember, check us out on TexasLatinoConservatives.com. Have a blessed week, and don't forget, stay involved and vote. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Nos vemos el próximo miércoles.